This week in CIST 1530, Chapter 9, we're going to look at advanced compositing. In this lesson, we're going to look at applying and editing smart filters, using the liquefying filter to distort an image, applying color effects to selected areas of an image, applying filters to create various effects. We're also going to look at using the history panel to return to a previous state, and also upscale a low resolution image for high resolution printing. In this chapter, in this lesson, is about being more creative with Photoshop than about strict techniques. You'll have a chance to explore more of your artistic applications of Photoshop as you composite multiple images into a poster. Can you see on the screen, this will be our final result of our poster. So first, we're going to start looking at some of the filters. These filters are going to be central to your work, especially if you use programs with a lot of filter images, something you may be familiar with. So we'll start by looking at the filter menu. So we'll see that we have a lot of different filters that can be applied to images or layers. We'll see first the neutral filters. This is a group of filters that's new to Photoshop 2021. They're in our own group because they incorporate machine learning models. This is something we will cover in Chapter 15. So we look down to the filter gallery. This is where you can try multiple filters in a single filter gallery. So you can click on each one of these and adjust settings. For example, I'm in now the paint poster edges, so I can adjust the edge thickness, the intensity of the edges. We got all kinds of different options in here. The filter gallery is a great way you can look at the filters. These are not applied to the image until I click OK. And so I can look and see how a filter is going to be applied to my layer. All right, so below the filter gallery, I've got some options here. For example, I've got the adapted wide angle lens correction, the liquefy filter, vanishing point. I also have a camera raw filter. That allows some camera raw features to be applied to a Photoshop layer. Below this, I do have other options in here that can be applied. 3D, blur gallery, special effects filters, such as pixelate and stylized filters. The reasons why special effects filters appear in multiple locations in the filter menu instead of a single filter group, that's because it's a mix of new and old filters developed and acquired in multiple stages over the long history of Photoshop. Now you can also use the edit, search, and help. Photoshop help commands to look for specific filters or look for more information about them. So next we'll look at smart filters. All right, so when applying a smart filter, it's going to be kind of similar to putting an adjustment layer. So I'm going to click on one of these layers. For example, I'm going to drag this to another layer. All right, so smart filters are non-destructive. They can be adjusted, they can be turned off and on, or they can be deleted at any time. Now, in contrast to that, regular filters, they are permanently changing image, and once applied, they cannot be removed. Now, unlike adjustment layers, smart filters can be applied only to a smart object layer. So I would suggest to duplicate and hide layers that you want to keep in a bitmap form before you convert them to a smart object. Now, smart filters and smart objects, they are the same thing. A smart filter is just really a smart object with a filter applied to it. Now, we've worked with the liquefy filter in the past. You know, it is a little bit different than the puppet warp feature. The puppet warp, you place pins to treat different areas of the image differently. So I do encourage you to try both of those. Now, once again, this chapter here is going to introduce you to a few of the filters. I do encourage you to experiment with these filters, try out different filters on your own. That's where you get the creative part of Photoshop and the fun part of Photoshop. Now, one thing I want to point out is that when you do apply a filter, if you apply the same filter multiple times, you will see where it says last filter here. That will be where it will appear. Filters are also going to be applied to the active visible layer or to a selected area of a layer. If the filter can't be used for some reason, it may be related to the image mode. So you can always come over to image mode and you can see what type of mode it is in the color. So for example, some filters can only be applied to RGB images or 8-bit channels. You can always change the mode if you have to apply that filter. Also, you may run into an out of memory error running some filters, which when you do this, many Photoshop operations, they can overcome the limited RAM by using virtual memory. But some filters, they have to be processed entirely in available RAM. You know, if you install more RAM, that may let the filter succeed. But you can also try closing any unused applications or restarting the computer. All right, so let's start with our chapter here. I'll also give you an example of applying a filter. For example, if I apply a blur, we'll apply the Gaussian blur. In this, I can set the radius, and you can see how it's affecting that image. Now, these are applied. Once they're applied, I can't take them off. If I convert this to a smart filter and let Photoshop do its thing, maybe. So I convert this to a smart object. You'll see that in the layers panel, I do have this little box in the corner. Let me know that it is a smart object. So now when I apply a filter, and you'll see that some of these are blurred out now. You see when I adjust these, those filters will now be applied similar to our layer styles. And I can cut those on and off. Now, using the history panel, if I want to undo this, and go back to a point in time for my image, I can go to Window and now do History. And each one of these steps, I can go back and undo those steps by selecting those. Now, once I perform an action, another action, these disabled steps will be erased completely. So example, if I go back to when I open the layer, and let's say I just paint with the brush on this layer. Now if we look at our history, we'll see that now everything that happened after I opened the layer has been removed. I can also remember to take a snapshot so I can go back and try different features and still go back to that point in time. Okay, so this is our final image that we are going to complete. And we have all these starting files. Now I've went ahead and opened them up into individual files. I recommend going to File and go to Browse and Bridge. When Bridge opens, navigate for Bridge over here. Bridge at times does take a little bit to respond. So when you can access the images in Bridge, navigate to the location of your files. And you'll see all of your files will be located there, and then your monster makeup. So I'm going to close everything I've got open in Photoshop. If you're in here, I'm going to hold down Shift and click all of these images. Now, when I open these, they will be opened up as one single image. I'm sorry, as individual layers. So I want to make sure I go to Tools, come into Photoshop, and then I will load into Photoshop layers so that they'll be loaded in all on the same time or same layer panel, but you'll see that there'll be each individual layers. Okay, so now that I've got my Frankenstein monster model loaded in, I've got to now arrange my layers. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look for the monster hair, and I'm going to drag it to the top layer of this stack. Now, in your assignment, depending on where you click on these or how you decide to bring these in, it may already be on the top. So take some time, reorder these as listed in your book. Franken goes on the bottom. All right, so he's on the bottom now. Now, if I want to select multiple layers, I click on the first layer I'm going to select, and I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and I'm going to select every other layer. Then come to Edit and to Free Transform. This allows me to transform all of these layers at once. So I can drag these, I can resize them, I can reposition the layers. So in this case, I'm going to reposition them until they're about 50% of their original size. I can also type that value in. Click the check mark. Now, with all of these still selected, I can also position these as well. So I'm going to try to position this to over this man's face. Don't worry about the adjustments. I will fix everything later. Actually, let me drag him down some so we can see what we're actually doing. Make my selections again. You can also use the keyboard Control-T shortcut. And submit. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is hide all of the layers except for the green skin texture and the Franken layer. Which should get me to about this area here. So then I just want to kind of center it over the face. Now, I can also use the Control-T or go to Edit, Free Transform, and I can resize this. And you can use the mouth and the eyes as a guide to get the facial features kind of reset here. Now, obviously, you can see that it's a little bit too small right now. When I put the mouth on, the eyes are hidden. So I would adjust this out until I'm comfortable with where it is. And then once I'm comfortable, I can click the Commit button. All right, so next I want to make sure that only this green skin is chosen and selected, and now I'm going to apply the liquefy filter. After I convert this to a smart filter. So now the green skin texture has been changed. So I'm going to go to filter and choose liquefy. Okay, so with one of the features of the liquefy feature is the face aware liquefy. So in here, I'm going to select this. This is something we've already looked at a couple of chapters ago in lesson 5. I'm going to click the show backdrop. I'm going to set the opacity to 75%. Choose the zoom tool. And I'm going to zoom in on the eye area. Okay, so I've got some adjustments to do here. Now I'm going to use the forward warp tool. And what this does, this pushes the pixels forward as you drag. So I'm going to set the brush size options. I'm going to set this size to 150 and the pressure to 75. All right, so now it's telling me that I am going to pull the monster's makeup right eyebrow down to close the opening eye. And then I'm going to pull up from under the eye. Now this is something I'm going to adjust for both sets. You may want to make it a little different settings for each one to give it a unique look. Then I'm going to click OK. Now because I've used this as a smart filter, I can turn this on and off. All right, so the next layer I'm going to work with is the green nose. So I'm going to turn this on. Make sure that it is visible. Select the layer. Now using the Control T, I can also use Control T, the transform tool, to drag and position and resize as needed for this image. Once I'm happy with this selection, I'm going to click this commit. And I'm going to repeat this with the rest of the layers. So I'm going to turn on the green next stitches. Resize these. As I see I need them. Now I'm not going to spend a lot of time getting these absolutely just perfect in my eyes because knowing myself, I could be here all day with this. Next we'll do the green ear staples. And then I'm going to place that as needed. Resize this. Next we're going to work with this enhanced green forehead. Now you'll see that you may have some hair. For example, if you think this is too big, you may adjust this and have some of the hair at the top still appear. You will cover that up with another layer. All right, the bows layer is next. So I'm going to adjust these in, place them on the side of the necks. For example, I'm not happy with that there. Adjust that out. this image here, I'm going to adjust a little bit here, move this stuff out of the way. Okay, so this is not something that's set on this guy perfect. With this. Now, if I decide I need to edit the smart filter, excuse me, let me finish this here. And so I still had some work that should have been done on this. I can edit this smart filter, double clicking the smart filter tool, the liquify. Okay, so I'm going to zoom back in on his eyes. Now, on this, I can use the bloat tool. For example, if I want to kind of expand some of the features, use the pucker tool to kind of bring some stuff in. I'm going to adjust the tools here just a little. Play around with this to adjust your settings as you see it's needed. Once you're happy with it, you can click OK. As you see, I don't really like this. So once again, I can go up to my history panel and go back in time to where I'm before I've made changes. Then I can go back and try these again if I feel like I need to make changes to the image. So this is one of the things where you get to play with your artistic ability in Photoshop. Painting a layer we have talked about in the past. You have your blending modes that you can choose. So in this case, I want to paint the exposed skin. I'm going to paint this green. First, I'm going to create a new layer. Click off of that. So I've created a new layer. I'm just going to leave it named Layer 1. And from the blending mode, I'm going to choose color. Now what this does is it's going to combine the luminance of the base color, which is color already on the layer, with a hue and saturation. So let me undo that. Go back in my history panel here. Color back on kind. So I created a new layer. In this case, I'm going to put it right above the Franken layer. Choose this, and I'm going to choose color. I'm I'm going to come over and I'm going to select the brush tool. I'm going to make it a 60 pixel size. The hardness is set to 0%. By holding down the Alt key, that's going to temporarily change to this eyedropper tool. So when I'm ready to go back and choose a color, I place the eyedropper tool over the color, and when I release this, it'll take back to the brush tool. So if I hold the Alt key, turns this, I click, you'll see that I have now selected a color as the color changed, and when I release, it'll go back to the brush tool. All right, so now I just want to make sure I select just the area here. So I'm going to make sure that I click on the thumbnail. So I'm going to hold down Control and click to make a selection. So now that selection marquee is going to be around the layer. Notice that it's not around the complete hair and everything else. It is only the Franken layer has been selected. I do want to make sure that I got layer 1 selected for my next step, where I'm going to paint over the exposed skin. Now, be careful about the painting over the shirt, as I did here. You can always go back and adjust this. But you will only paint within that selection area. You can zoom in on this, adjust your paintbrush size as needed. For example, I'm not really wanting to paint the ring, so I would need to adjust the size for that. Also, the shirt, I went a little over on that. You can just do the undo brush tool also, so I don't have to go back and repaint everything. You also want to make sure that you paint any of the areas that weren't covered on the face. Careful around the eyes, though. As you see, you can paint the eyes because it is part of that selection. Now, I'm not going to spend all the time painting this. Just when you're happy with your selection, your painting, make sure you hit select and deselect. All right, so once you're finished with your image, you can come to edit. Image, layer, merge visible. You make everything down into one image. Now from here, we're going to start compositing. So we're once again going to go back to Browse and Bridge. And in here, I'm going to get the last three. I'm going back to Tools, Photoshop, load files into Photoshop. Oh, with my Move tool selected, I'm going to drag these images over into my working image. see. Looks like I grabbed the wrong one there. Let me grab the tombstone. All right, so from here, I want to reposition the background. With images such as like this tombstone, I can go to filter, and then here I can add for example, I'll add the clouds to this. So I'm going to reset my colors back to the default. So I'm going to go to filter, render, and then difference clouds. So that easy to give it this dramatic look. I can also add more than one filter to this. So in this case, I'm going to go to blur gallery, and I'm going to choose the iris blur. Okay, so from in here, I can adjust this. So I'm going to drag this pen up to the top. Now I can adjust this, dragging this in different directions. And we'll drag it in some. So again, it's something that you can play with and explore your artistic freedom. We'll click OK. Now it's about composition. So now I don't want my monster covered up. And actually, to compare this to ending correctly, I'm going to use their monster. And drag him over here. You'll see though that even on the ending, they did not fully get all of the coloring of the skin. So use the combination of adjusting your brush sizes and zooming in and out to achieve your desired look. Now with this tombstone, to place it where it is, you can Control T to transform it, adjust the size of the tombstone as needed, and place it where you want it to be seen. Now this image here, working with, now one more thing on the tombstone, you can add adjustment layers as well. So for example, in this one, I'm going to add a channel mixer. Now when I adjust this, you'll see it's adjusted to everything below it. So adjusting the settings here just to apply to this image. I'm going to create it as a clipping mask so that now that the image will only be applied to that tombstone. And the settings it has in the book is to change the blue value to +108 and the green value to 37. I adjust the red, so we'll put that back to 0. Now this is something that you can adjust this as you feel that it adds to the image. Now once again, I'm going to look at now an exposure. You see that it is still clipped into this layer as well. So this, I'm going to expand the exposure slider to 0.90. Yours may look different. If you wanted more of a color such as that, you can adjust the sliders as needed. Okay, so let's look at the faces. So we're going to file open, and I'm open faces. We're going to look at adjusting a low res image and making it into more of a high res. So I'm going to zoom in on this face, and I'm just going to zoom this into 300%. So I went one too far. You can see the percentage right here. Okay, so I have this zoomed in 300%. You see that it has lost some quality on this. I can go to image, and I'm going to go to image size. Now in the image size here, I'm going to make sure that this I'm going to be in pixels. And when I adjust this to 400 on the pixels, you see that it has really increased the size of this image. So I'm going to scroll over so we can see this image. Now you have a lot of different options when you're working with the image. You can change the canvas size, the image size, the rotation of the image. So once again, change the image size. In this image dialog box, we're going to change this to 400, height to 400. Now we see we have the resample. In here we've got it set to automatic. We do have some options in here for when we want to enlarge an image. So I'm going to tell it to preserve the details, the enlargement. Now you see that the reduced noise is located underneath this. When I choose to preserve details, it's going to make the image sharper. It also may make the image noise more visible. So in this case, I'm going to reduce the noise by 50%. And I can adjust that by the slider or by typing in. And I can drag the image around in the preview window as well to view how it's going to look. If the reduced noise takes away too much detail, as you can see, I can adjust that as well. We'll click OK. We've increased the size of the image. So here we'll go select all, and then I'm going to edit copy. All right, so on my movie poster, slide it down some. So on the movie poster, I am going to use my elliptical marquee tool. And I'm going to choose the feather, set at 50%. So this is how much the softness is going to be around the edge of the image. So I'm going to draw where I want the image to be placed. Now this is right now currently on the monster layer. That's what I've selected. So I'm going to deselect that. Let's create a new layer. Now that new layer, we're going to draw our rectangular marquee. We'll readjust the size of this. I'm going to go to Edit, Paste Special, and I'm going to paste into. That's going to put this into that marquee. You'll notice that it does have the feather. It still kind of needs to be adjusted. So with this selected, I can transform the area. So with that, I can adjust so that it's inside of that mask. I still have the box shape, so I don't want to adjust this as needed. To get rid of the shape. Now the issue I had here is the shape of what I drew the marquee. We're going to change the opacity to 50%. So they're just barely coming through. And change the blending mode to luminosity. So now you can barely see the man screaming here. And once again, this is something that you can play with and adjust as needed. Depending on your layer composition. Change the shape. Now what I did there is I moved the layer, so I undid the clipping mask. Fix that. Let's go back and create the clipping mask again. I'll push this back in the correct place. So chapter 9, create your Frankenstein monster. Have fun with it. Show your creativity off with using the filters and your layer compositions.